Welcome to PandaAudioBooks, the perfect place for a huge collection of fantasy novels. If you enjoy my content and want to support my work, a small contribution via PayPal is greatly appreciated. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit the notifications bell to stay updated with our latest audiobook chapters. Chapter 1186, Entering the Abyss. The yellow-robed man's face immediately paled after Han Li identified him, and he stuttered unsteadily. "I wasn't aware of your true identity during our previous encounter, so please forgive me if I offended you in any way, Grand Elder Han." The core formation stage woman was quite surprised to see this. This senior martial brother Kuei of hers was normally a very smooth talker, so why was it that he had been reduced to such a stuttering mess? Furthermore, it sounded as if he had been acquainted with the Grand Elder since a long time ago. The woman's heart was filled with confusion, but she didn't dare to ask any questions. A hint of a smile appeared on Han Li's face. "It's not your fault. I concealed my cultivation base back then for my own purposes, so I certainly don't plan to blame you for anything. However, I really am rather surprised that you were able to progress to the core formation stage. How are your other martial brothers doing?" This yellow-robed cultivator was none other than Kuei Huan, the drifting cloud sect cultivator who had invited Han Li to hunt for snowcloud foxes with him many years ago. The aptitude of his spiritual roots was very average, yet he had managed to progress all the way from the chi condensation stage to the core formation stage. As such, Han Li was naturally quite surprised to see this. Han Li clearly recalled everything that had happened all those years ago, and a wry smile appeared on Kuei Huan's face upon seeing this as he replied, "Senior Martial Brother Wang and the others weren't as lucky as I am. They were unable to even progress to the Foundation Establishment stage and passed away many years ago." "I see. Their aptitude was quite mediocre, so it's no surprise that they were unable to progress to the Foundation Establishment stage. Looks like you encountered some brilliant opportunities, Martial Nephew Kuei," Han Li sighed. "Over 100 years ago, I unintentionally consumed an unknown spirit herb, and my cultivation base progressed at a phenomenal rate thereafter," Kuei Huan explained with a slightly sheepish smile. He, you're quite a lucky man, Martial Nephew Kuei. However, I'm not here to catch up and reminisce about old times today. I have some questions to ask you all." Han Li suddenly adopted a serious expression. "We'll be sure to tell you everything we know, Grand Elder Han," the woman replied obediently. Even if Han Li wasn't the Grand Elder of the Drifting Cloud sect, he was still the #1 cultivator in the Heavenly South region, so he had to be treated with the utmost respect. "I just wanted as if any of you have noticed any abnormalities with the Devilish Abyss seal on the 7 Spirit Islands," Han Li inquired. The woman faltered momentarily before replying, "The seal? It seems to be fine. Our patrol teams from the 7 islands guard the seal in shifts, and no abnormalities have been reported to us." "What do you mean by this, Martial Uncle Han?" Han Li's brows furrowed upon hearing this. "The seal is guarded in shifts. Doesn't that mean you won't know if something's amiss when patrol teams from other islands are on duty?" Han asked with a dark expression. Kuei Huan and the woman glanced at each other, and the former could only muster up his courage as he admitted, "Unless the other islands go to the trouble of reporting these matters to us, I'm afraid that this is indeed the case." However, to their surprise, Han Li wasn't enraged upon hearing this. Instead, a hint of light flashed through his eyes as he suddenly patted the storage pouch hanging from his waist, producing a set of formation plates and formation flags of different colors. "Take 36 disciples with you and head to the entrance of the abyss straight away, then set up this malevolent heavenly formation. I'm going to be making a trip to the abyss. If anything tries to come out, make sure to trap it with this formation. I don't expect you to kill it, just make sure it doesn't get away," Han Li instructed calmly. Kuei Huan and the woman were very surprised to hear this, but they still immediately agreed. "There's no time to waste. Pick your disciples quickly, then set up the formation as soon as you can. I'm going ahead to the abyss first." Hopefully, this is just a false alarm." Han Li delivered a final set of instructions before tossing the formation tools toward the 2 core formation cultivators and rising into the air. Before the 2 of them had a chance to reply, Azure light appeared over his body as he shot forth into the distance, heading directly for the seal on the devilish abyss. The woman and Kuei Huan hurriedly bowed in his direction before immediately pulling out their voice transmission talismans, instructing all of the disciples on the island to immediately assemble. A short while later, 36 cultivators were picked out and the 2 core formation cultivators led them toward the abyss while carrying the formation tools. As this was an instruction from Han Li, they didn't dare to delay in the slightest. At this moment, Han Li had already reached the entrance of the abyss. The massive vortex of the past had now been reduced to only around 500 to 600 feet wide. Furthermore, there were a dozen or so massive stone pillars distributed around the vortex. The pillars were constructed from an unknown material that was like metal, but also like wood, and were able to float in a completely stationary manner in the surrounding seawater. Beams of white spiritual light were radiating from the stone pillars, creating a white light barrier that completely sealed the vortex within. Han Li hovered above the light barrier and examined it with narrowed eyes. There were 7 or 8 cultivators standing behind Han Li, one of which was a red-robed core formation cultivator, who asked tentatively, "Senior Han, as you can see, the seal is completely unscathed. Could it be that the information you received was perhaps incorrect? The cultivators from our 7 islands have been constantly keeping an eye on this place, and we've never let our guards drop." The remaining Foundation establishment cultivators were standing even further away, not even daring to breathe too loudly. "HMPH, I know at least half a dozen methods to infiltrate this seal without damaging it. It's not a difficult task to get past you guys," Han Li replied coldly without even turning his head. The red-robed cultivator could only give a wry smile in response. "Disciples from my drifting cloud sect are going to arrive to set a formation soon in order to fortify the entrance. All you have to do is cooperate with them. There won't be any issues, will there?" Han Li asked coldly. "Not at all. Senior, are you really going to enter through the seal?" the red-robed cultivator asked in a hesitant manner. Han Li looked up into the sky and replied without any hesitation, "Of course I'm going to be making a trip into the abyss. Otherwise, why would I come here in person? Now's the time when the devilish chi is at its most feeble state, so it's the best time for me to enter the abyss." The time was at exactly noon, and the scorching sun had reached its highest point in the sky. The red-robed cultivator also looked up at the dazzling sun, and an enlightened expression appeared on his face. "All right, all of you can go back to what you were doing. I'm going to enter the abyss now." Han Li didn't wish to delay any longer. His sleeve rustled and a ball of 3 colored flames appeared in his hand, transforming into the tri-flame fan. Han Li then waved the fan gently through the air and runes began to appear on the fan as 3 colored flames appeared over its surface. Han Li's body swayed and he shot forth directly toward the light barrier as a streak of azure light. At the same time, he waved his tri-flame fan toward the light barrier, and the fan had seemingly transformed into a pitilessly sharp blade of fire amid a resounding boom. The blade of fire was able to easily tear a rift that was around 10 feet wide into the light barrier, and inky black devilish chi erupted from within before attempting to permeate through the air. The red-robed cultivator's expression changed slightly upon hearing this, while all of the Foundation establishment cultivators let loose involuntary cries of surprise. However, Han Li was prepared well in advance as he viciously swatted his other sleeve downward. A burst of azure light was immediately sent sweeping downward, instantly repressing the leaking devilish chi with his immense spiritual pressure. Immediately thereafter, a burst of azure light flashed as Han Li flew into the abyss. The white light barrier quickly sealed over again, and not even so much as a single wisp of devilish chi managed to escape. The red-robed cultivator heaved an internal sigh of relief, and at the same time, a self-deprecating smile appeared on his face. With the #1 great cultivator of the Heavenly South region present, there was no need for him to be so nervous. Right at this moment, one of the Foundation establishment cultivators standing behind him suddenly yelled, "Marshal Uncle, look!" The red-robed cultivator faltered upon hearing this before turning toward the direction that the disciple was pointing toward. There in the distance, several tens of streaks of light were hurtling toward them. They're drifting cloud sect cultivators. Looks like Senior Han is quite serious about this. Could it be that there really has been some powerful devil that has snuck into the abyss? The red-robed cultivator murmured with a complex expression on his face. Amid the vast expanse of pitch-black devilish chi within the abyss, Han Li had already summoned his divine Devilbane lightning to shield himself. At this moment, he was advancing toward the deepest point in the abyss amid a series of rumbling thunderclaps. The golden arcs of lightning around his body intertwined incessantly with the devilish chi in the air, and the latter was constantly being eradicated in Han Li's wake. Han Li paid this no heed as he made a series of hand seals over and over again, unleashing a secret technique from the profound nascent formation arts. 10,000 feet, 20,000 feet, 30,000 feet. Han Li maintained the output of the secret technique without pause, but he detected nothing within his spiritual sense. As he delved deeper and deeper into the abyss, his expression gradually darkened. After reaching depths of around 70,000 to 80,000 feet, even he was beginning to doubt his own judgment. Could it be that his prediction had been incorrect? Could it be that the second nascent soul had never come here, and had instead gone elsewhere to cultivate? Just as these thoughts were flashing through Han Li's mind, his expression suddenly changed as he came to an abrupt halt. A grave expression appeared on his face as he made an alternate hand seal. At the same time, he began to chant something in a low voice, and he stared directly up ahead with an unblinking gaze and a blue light shimmering in his eyes. All of a sudden, a peculiar look appeared on his face, and he appeared to be rather uncertain. After a brief hesitation, he sprang into action again. However, on this occasion, Han Li seemed to be very clear on where his target was, and his movements were a lot more decisive and purposeful. He descended a further 3,000 to 4,000 feet, upon he heard a low feral snarl. He pursed his lips and slowed down significantly in his descent. At the same time, he tightened his grip around his triflame fan. The blue light shimmering within Han Li's eyes became even more dazzling as he stared intently into the devilish chi down below with an unblinking gaze. At Han Li's current cultivation base, if he were to unleash his bright sight spirit eyes with all his might, he would already be able to see up to 1,000 feet away in the myriad depth devilish abyss. However, things became rather blurry at a distance of more than 500 feet away. Around 1,000 feet below Han Li, there was a tall and broad black figure that was unleashing an almighty roar. Han Li looked down with his spirit eyes, and stared directly into the black figure's vicious crimson eyes. Chapter 1187. Devilification. A chill ran down Han Li's spine. The crimson eyes down below were filled with violence and brutality, and they were not the eyes of a normal human being. Instead, those eyes belonged to a crazed and bloodthirsty wild beast. Han Li was still wondering whether the crazed being down below was the target for his trip when the thunderous roar came to an abrupt halt, and the black figure down below swayed before disappearing into the surround devilish chi. Han Li's expression changed slightly upon seeing this, but he merely drew a silver shield from within his sleeve in a calm and unhurried manner. The shield then transformed into a silver light barrier that enshrouded his entire body within. Just as he had set up those defensive measures, the devilish chi behind him suddenly began to surge as a hirsute black devilish arm shot forth like lightning, crashing straight into the light barrier. A thunderous boom erupted, and the devilish claws embedded themselves over half a foot into the silver light barrier. Han Li felt the barrier of light around him tremor violently as a burst of immense force came sweeping toward him. His expression changed slightly, and only after striding forward 2 small steps was he able to absorb the force of this fearsome impact. At the same time, he waved a hand through the air and a golden sword that was several feet in length appeared. He wrapped his fingers firmly around the hilt of the sword before lashing out rapidly behind him without even turning his head. Golden light flashed, and half of a hirsute arm was severed by the golden sword. The black figure roared as it stumbled backward a few steps before righting itself. However, it continued to glower at Han Li with crazed ferocity in its crimson eyes. Han Li turned around and examined the black figure before heaving a faint sigh. "So it really is you. It appears you failed in your attempt to inject devilish chi into your body, and have lost your sanity from devilification." The black figure was only around 100 feet away from him, so he was naturally able to catch a clear glimpse of it. The devilish creature bore a strong resemblance to Han Li's sovereign devil corpse, but most of its black robes had been torn away, revealing large swaths for long corpse fur. There were also inky black fist-sized scales that had grown over some of his vital regions, and those scales were shimmering with a sinister light amid the darkness. The skull-like face of the sovereign devil corpse had been enshrouded under a thin layer of black chi, and he could indistinctly make out a set of extremely twisted features beyond the veil of devilish chi. Not a single drop of blood was dripping from the devil corpse's severed arm, and it appeared that it had no blood within its body at all. It was emitting a low snarl from its mouth and staring intently at the golden sword in Han Li's hand, but it didn't charge toward Han Li again. Han Li's powerful sword strike had planted the seed of wariness in its heart. Hence, even though it wanted nothing better than to tear Han Li into shreds with its bare hands, its self-preservation instincts were preventing it from attacking. There was a storage pouch hanging from its waist, but it appeared to have completely lost its intelligence due to its devilification, to the extent that it didn't even have the mental capacity to summon weapons to use in battle. It turned out that even though the devilish chi in the myriad depth devilish abyss wasn't as potent as that which was sealed within the Kunwu mountain, its degree of devilification was still far beyond the second nascent soul's anticipation. Furthermore, the second nascent soul had predicted that Han Li would be arriving at the abyss soon, and in its urgency, it increased the influx of devilish chi into its body during the final stage of its cultivation. The second nascent soul did indeed possess the great development technique, yet it was too busy cultivating the profound yin arts, and had only reached the second layer of the great development technique. As such, even though its spiritual sense was more powerful than other cultivators of the same cultivation base, it was still quite a stretch to expect it to be able to withstand the prolonged influx of devilish chi. As a result, the devil corpse was able to withstand the devilification process, yet the nascent soul was unable to do so and succumbed in the end, thereby losing its sanity and intelligence. At this point, the devil corpse was nothing but a half-devil creature that was ruled over solely by its instincts and propensity for slaughter. It was not that much superior compared to a demon beast that yet to attain intelligence. Han Li carefully examined his opponent, and was finally able to verify that it had indeed lost all of its intelligence. He heaved a long sigh of relief upon making his observation, but at the same time, he found this development to be rather amusing. He had regarded the second nascent soul to be an extremely powerful enemy, and had flown for a consecutive month without rest to get here, only to be faced with such a farcical scenario, one that left him rather speechless. However, it would undoubtedly be a lot easier to subdue such a buffoon of an opponent, and capturing it should be a piece of cake. With that in mind, Han Li immediately lifted his hand without any hesitation, raising the triflame fan high in the air. Seeing as his opponent had lost all of its intelligence, there was no need for him to hold back. All he had to do was forcibly incinerate its body with his triflame fan. Without a body, his second nascent soul would naturally be forced to surrender. Just as three colored flames were appearing over the surface of the triflame fan, the devil corpse suddenly let loose an almighty roar. Gusts of devilish wind were swept up around it, following which extremely pure devilish chi abruptly converged toward its severed arm before rapidly taking shape. An incredible scene then unfolded. The devil corpse's severed arm was completely healed in the blink of an eye, and it was as if Han Li had never even struck it. Instantaneous regeneration. Han Li faltered upon seeing this, but a cold smile then appeared on his face as he injected even more spiritual power into his triflame fan. Instantaneous regeneration was a rare ability, but he had killed more than one or two demon beasts with that inherent ability. As long as he could completely destroy its body with overwhelming power, there would be nothing left for it to regenerate. A sharp cry rang out as a fire raven that was several feet in size flew out from the fan. There were three colored runes revolving around its body as it hurtled directly toward the devil corpse. In the face of these devastating three-colored flames, all of the surrounding devilish chi was instantly reduced to nothingness. The devil corpse also seemed to have sensed that something was amiss. If the second nascent soul had retained its intelligence, it would definitely be unwilling to face such an immensely powerful attack head-on. However, the devil corpse's killing intent only seemed to have been intensified by the sight of these fearsome flames, and it let loose an almighty roar as the surrounding devilish chi surged toward it in a frenzy. The devil corpse immediately grew several feet in height. It then opened its mouth and blasted forth a pillar of inky black light, heading directly toward the three-colored fire raven. An earth-shattering boom erupted. Within the depths of the devilish abyss, a three-colored ball of light and a ball of black light exploded in unison, and both sides seemed to be evenly matched in power, thereby resulting in an intense impasse. A hint of surprise appeared on Han Li's face upon seeing this. The Triflame fan was so powerful that even nascent soul cultivators wouldn't dare to take its attack head-on. Even though he was only unleashing a portion of the Triflame fan's power, it still came as quite a surprise to him that the mid-nascent soul stage Devil Corpse was able to stand up against it. He looked on at the clash taking place nearby, and his eyes narrowed slightly. The 3 colored runes revolved around the flames flashed violently before the flames were finally able to overpower the black ball of light, slowly engulfing it before surging toward the Devil Corpse. A vicious light appeared in the Devil Corpse's eyes upon seeing this, and it sucked the nearby devilish chi into its mouth in preparation to blast forth another black pillar of light. Han Li's expression darkened upon seeing this, and a pair of azure and white wings appeared on his back following a loud thunderclap. These were his recently refined thunderstorm wings. The wings on his back flapped gently, and his entire body disappeared amid a light breeze. In the next instant, an azure arc of lightning flashed behind the Devil Corpse. Han Li emerged soundlessly from within the arc of lightning before aiming a devastating punch toward the Devil Corpse's back. A massive shimmering azure fist appeared in the air before hurtling toward the Devil Corpse from behind. The Devil Corpse was completely caught off guard and sent flying amid a loud thump, flying headfirst into the vast expanse of 3 colored flames up ahead. The devil immediately let loose a roar of fury and the utmost horror as bursts of inky black devilish chi surfaced over its body in an attempt to keep the flames at bay. However, the 3 colored flames enshrouded the Devil Corpse's body right before Han Li's expressionless eyes, rapidly brushing aside the black chi before forcing the Devil Corpse to disintegrate while it was completely powerless to resist. The 3 colored runes flashed and the Devil Corpse was completely engulfed. A cold light flashed through Han Li's eyes as he prepared himself to snuff out the 3 colored flames and capture the second nascent soul within. However, right at this moment, the 3 colored flames suddenly shuddered violently. A ball of crimson light suddenly exploded within, forcibly blasting a hole into the flames. A streak of black light then shot forth from within, reaching a height of over 300 feet above Han Li after just a few flashes. Han Li's heart jolted with surprise as he focused his gaze upward. He discovered that there was a green nascent soul enshrouded within the black light, holding an inky black flag within its little hand. It was none other than Han Li's second nascent soul. The nascent soul looked back at Han Li with a cold expression, and the clarity in its eyes suggested that it had completely recovered its intelligence. Han Li harumphed coldly as he immediately flapped his thunderstorm wings, upon which he abruptly disappeared from the spot. The second nascent soul's expression changed drastically upon seeing this, and it tossed the small black flag down below. As it did so, it made a hand seal before stabbing a finger toward the flag. The ghost-sifting banner that Han Li had repaired many years ago revolved through the air as black light flashed violently over its surface. It then self-detonated amid a resounding boom. Countless strands of black light shot forth to create a dense net, encompassing an area with a radius of several kilometers below the nascent soul. The second nascent soul then let loose a long cry as it turned and flew upward with all its might. Beneath the black net, an arc of azure lightning suddenly appeared out of thin air, following which Han Li's figure was revealed. He looked at the descending black net, then up at the second nascent soul, which had almost disappeared from his line of sight, and a cold expression flashed through his eyes. He abruptly flapped a sleeve through the air, sending a streak of dazzling golden light slashing into the black net. However, the black net merely wobbled slightly, yet showed no sign of unraveling. Han Li's brows furrowed as he pointed a finger toward the golden light. The golden light swayed, and a layer of golden lightning arcs appeared slashing toward the black net again. Following a thunderous boom, a large hole was finally blasted into the net. Han Li immediately hurtled through the hole, transforming into a streak of azure light as he rushed directly toward the second nascent soul. Meanwhile, at the entrance to the myriad-depth devilish abyss, there were several tens of cultivators standing around the seal with formation flags and formation plates in their hands. All of them wore expressions of rapt focus as spiritual light of different colors shimmered from their respective formation tools, indicating that the formation had already been activated. All of a sudden, a resounding boom erupted from within the white seal, followed by a violent tremor. A massive inky black sword that was several tens of feet in length punctured through the seal before inflicting a gash upon it that was over 100 feet in length. A ball of black light then shot forth from within. Chapter 1188, Capturing the Nascent Soul. Activate the formation. Kuei Huan and the women were focusing intently on the seal, and they were able to react immediately as soon as the second nascent soul threatened to escape. The 36 drifting cloud sect disciples tossed their formation plates and formation flags into the air in unison. Brilliant spiritual light immediately radiated from those formation tools as layers of 5-colored light emerged before sweeping downward. The ball of black light was completely caught off guard, and before it knew it, it had been ensnared within the light. It was naturally none other than the second nascent soul that was situated within the black light. When it had been engulfed by the flames of the tri-flame fan, it had unconsciously expelled all of the devilish it had absorbed into its body as a defensive measure to save itself. As such, the devilish chi was reduced to nothingness by the flames, and even more of the devil corpse had been incinerated. As a result, however, the nascent soul was able to unintentionally reverse its devilification and return to its senses. With Han Li's memories to guide it, it immediately detonated the devilish tool, the Crimson Blood Sword, to break through the 3-colored flames. At the sight of Han Li unleashing his thunderstorm wings, the second nascent soul could only grit its teeth and detonate the ghost sifting banner as well. As expected, the detonation of these two treasures worked extremely well, and due to the fact that Han Li was taken by surprise, the second nascent soul really was able to sneak away. However, it knew that these tactics wouldn't be able to impede Han Li for very long, so it had already made up its mind. As soon as it escaped from the devilish abyss, it was going to unleash its nascent soul teleportation technique and escape to one of the 7 spirit islands. In preparation for this exact situation, it had set up an obscure hiding spot on that island well in advance. It had even used several special treasures to set up an extremely advanced formation that would conceal its aura, and it was confident that the formation would be undetectable to Han Li's spiritual sense. However, never would the second nascent soul have thought that the lone wolf, Han Li, would recruit the assistance of others on this occasion. Even though the formation outside had only been set up by low-grade cultivators, the formation itself was extremely powerful, and it had run right into the trap. The second nascent soul was ensnared within the light, and was naturally extremely shocked and enraged. It swung its little arms wildly at the light around it, unleashing streaks of black sword chi that fanned out around it. However, this 5-colored light was very troublesome in that it would be torn apart easily by the sword chi, but those gashes would seal over extremely quickly, affording the second nascent soul no opportunity for escape. The second nascent soul's expression changed drastically upon making this discovery, and it abruptly rubbed its hands together before flinging them outward at the same time. 2 pillars of black light immediately erupted forth before transforming into 2 massive swords that were each over 10 feet in length, both of which came crashing downward with devastating might. The cultivators that were desperately holding the formation together were finally unable to withstand the assault any longer. Following 2 rumbling booms, a hole that was several feet in diameter was blasted into the 5-colored light. Spiritual light flashed around the hole as it attempted to seal itself over again, but the hole was simply too large and there was insufficient magic power flowing into the formation from all of the cultivators, so it wasn't able to immediately close. The second nascent soul was ecstatic upon seeing this, and its body swayed as it immediately disappeared after unleashing its teleportation technique. In the next instant, black light flashed and the green nascent soul had appeared outside the 5-colored light. It aimed a vicious glare at the cultivators around it before making a hand seal to teleport away from this place. However, right at this moment, a gentle breeze suddenly blew past it, following which a humanoid figure appeared. Crap! The second nascent soul immediately teleported away without any hesitation. The humanoid figure that had appeared was naturally none other than Han Li, who had just emerged from the devilish abyss with his thunderstorm wings spread wide open. His expression darkened as the second nascent soul attempted to flee, and a cold harumph escaped from his mouth. A thin gash suddenly appeared on his glabella, following which a cloud of black chi rapidly billowed out from within. The black chi then materialized into an unsettling pitch-black eyeball that was staring into the distance. A streak of black light shot forth, striking a certain spot in the air over 200 feet away in a flash. The black light then exploded, and the stumbling figure of the second nascent soul appeared out of thin air. It raised its head to look up at Han Li, and there was incredulity and horror etched all over its little face. Han Li chuckled coldly as he opened his mouth to expel a small azure cauldron. The cauldron was clasped in his hand, following which the white and azure wings on his back flapped gently, and his entire body disappeared like a mild breeze. The second nascent soul knew that it was in a heap of trouble upon seeing this, and it immediately attempted to flee the scene as a streak of black light. However, right at this moment, a clump of azure threads suddenly shot from thin air, as if they had been waiting for the second nascent soul this entire time, and the second nascent soul was immediately bound in a tight azure cocoon. The second nascent soul was greatly startled by this development, and it unleashed countless streaks of black sword chi from all over its body to try and escape its cocoon. However, following a string of explosions and flashing black light, those azure threads remained completely unscathed. The second nascent soul was truly horrified now. Just as it was about to unleash another secret technique to try and escape, an azure arc of lightning flashed, and Han Li appeared out of thin air with a small cauldron hovering over his palm. The sight of the second nascent soul's desperate attempts to escape brought a cold expression onto his face, and he gently flicked a finger toward the small cauldron. A faint sound rang out as the cauldron's lid flew off on its own, and a burst of azure light erupted into the sky. The azure light resonated with the azure threads that had bound the second nascent soul, and those threads also began to emanate intense light. As they did so, the second nascent soul felt the cocoon tighten around its body, following which it was rendered completely unable to use its spiritual power. Following another flash of azure light, the azure cocoon shot forth and swept the powerless nascent soul into the small cauldron in the blink of an eye. Han Li then pointed at the cauldron and the lid came flying down as a streak of azure light, sealing up the cauldron's opening again. Han Li heaved an internal sigh of relief upon seeing this, and a smile finally appeared on his face. Even a late nascent soul great cultivator wouldn't be able to escape from within the heaven void cauldron. Congratulations on completing your objective, Martial Uncle Han. Kuei Huan and the women immediately approached Han Li to offer congratulatory words with fawning expressions on their faces. Han Li smiled and patted the storage pouch hanging from his waist to produce 2 white jade vials. He tossed the vials to Kuei Huan and cautioned, "Hee, you guys also contributed quite significantly during this process. There are some pills in this vial that'll be very helpful to your cultivation. Take them and split them up among yourself. Also, the security around the entrance of this devilish abyss must be tightened up. Otherwise, other devils could also sneak into it in the future." Kuei Huan was ecstatic after catching the jade vials, and he offered, "Yes, I'll be sure to discuss this matter with the other sects and dedicate more effort into guarding this place. Martial Uncle, would you like to rest on Spirit Turtle Island for a couple of days before returning to the sect?" "There's no need for that. This place isn't very far away from the sect and I have other matters to attend to, so I won't remain here any longer." Han Li shook his head before stowing his small cauldron away, then flying into the distance as a streak of azure light. Kuei Huan and the woman bowed toward the direction that Han Li had departed in, and only after a long while did they stand up straight again. "What kind of pills did Senior Han leave for you too? Any pills left behind by Senior Han must be quite potent, right?" The red-robed cultivator approached them with his accompanying sect disciples, and he was looking at the jade vials in Kuei Huan's hands with an envious expression on his face. "I'm not sure of that myself, but I'm sure these pills are indeed quite extraordinary. I think we should focus on fortifying the seal here." Kuei Huan gave a dry chuckle as white light flashed from his hand, and the 2 vials were stowed away. He was clearly unwilling to speak much about this matter. Even though the massive gash inflicted on the seal had been repaired, the spiritual light shimmering over its surface had clearly dimmed slightly. As such, the drifting cloud sect cultivators immediately flew toward the nearby stone pillars to fortify the seal again. The red-robed cultivator really wanted to know what pills were in those vials, yet he knew that it wouldn't be smart to press the issue. As such, he merely chuckled and also instructed the disciples behind him to assist in fortifying the seal as well. A ringing sound rang out from the dozen or so stone pillars in unison, and a layer of white spiritual light appeared over the surface of the seal as part of a gradual fortification process. Around half a month later, Han Li returned to the Dream Cloud Mountains. However, he didn't immediately return to the Drifting Cloud sect. Instead, he returned directly to the interconnected peaks. However, when he opened the restriction and landed in front of the cave abode on the main peak, there was already a woman standing outside, waiting for him. Han Li faltered slightly upon seeing this white-robed woman. Liu Yu pays her respects to her master. The beautiful woman extended a respectful bow toward him with a serious look on her face. This woman was none other than his in-name disciple, Liu Yu. Han Li's brows furrowed as he asked, "You've been here this entire time?" Liu Yu cast a surreptitious glance at Han Li as she replied, "I'm not the only one here. Senior Marshal Sister Song and Senior Marshal Sister Mu are also here. We were slightly concerned about you, so we decided to take shifts waiting here for your return. My Senior Marshal Sisters are currently with my Junior Marshal Sister in her cave abode. It's just capturing my second nascent soul. With my current cultivation base, there's nothing to be concerned about." "Does that mean all of you have met China already?" Han Li asked in a seemingly casual manner. "Yes, we've all met Junior Marshal Sister Tian. She's a very clever girl. It's no wonder that you would decide to take her under your wing, Master," Liu Yu replied with a dainty smile. Han Li raised an eyebrow and said in a nonchalant manner, "China isn't the same as you three. She possesses the dragon cry physique, so she doesn't have much of a future in cultivation. I made her my disciple for another reason, and there's no need for you to try and probe me for answers." "I wouldn't dare to do that, Master." Liu Yu was elated to hear this, but an awkward expression appeared on her face from having her ploy exposed. Han Li stroked his chin and suddenly instructed in a serious voice, "Seeing as you're all here, gather the other three and come to my cave abode. I have something to say to all of you." "Yes, Master." Liu Yu's heart stirred slightly in response. Han Li nodded before waving a sleeve through the air, sending a burst of azure light sweeping toward the closed gate of his cave abode. A loud rumbling erupted as the stone gate slowly rose up, and Han Li's body swayed before he entered the cave abode. Meanwhile, Liu Yu transformed into a streak of white light and headed straight for China's cave abode. Chapter 1189. Within the Cave Abode. A short while later, Han Li sat on the main seat within the hall of his cave abode, and he was surrounded by 4 beauties, all of whom wore extremely respectful expressions and didn't dare to many a single sound. Only after Mu Peeling's trio returned to the cave abode did they learn that not only had Han Li progressed to the late nascent soul stage, he was also the undisputed #1 cultivator of the Heavenly South region. The 3 women were quite shocked to hear these, and their awe and veneration toward Han Li were only compounded as a result. Han Li wore a cold expression on his face, and was scolding Mu Peeling's trio. "There's no need to worry about the second nascent soul, it's already been captured, and I'm going to erase its sentient will soon, then refine it into my second nascent soul again. However, the 3 of you sure are quite brave. Don't you know that the inner valley is an extremely dangerous place even for nascent soul cultivators? Marshal Uncle Han, we only took the risk to venture into the inner valley as the illusionary spirit herb was of the utmost importance to us. We won't do something so reckless ever again," Song Yu explained with her hands clasped behind her back. Han Li had been acquainted with Song Yu even prior to reaching the nascent soul stage, so he couldn't bring himself to scold her any further. Instead, his brows furrowed as he asked, "Illusionary spirit herb? Are you trying to refine the illusionary destruction pill to assist in a breakthrough?" "Indeed, Master, that was our objective," Liu Yu replied in a truthful manner. "If that's the case, you don't need to go searching for the illusionary spirit herb anymore. I just so happen to have a vial of illusionary destruction pills with me. Excessive consumption of pills during breakthroughs isn't advisable, so 2 pills for each of you will be enough." Han Li patted the storage pouch hanging from his waist, and a small green vial appeared in his hand, which he casually tossed toward Liu Yu. This vial of pills was something that he had obtained from a certain nascent soul cultivator he had slain in the past. They served no use for him, so he decided to sell the 3 women a favor by giving it to them. Only after Liu Yu had reflexively caught the vial did Han Li's words register in her mind, and she immediately extended a gesture of gratitude toward Han Li in a shocked and elated manner. Song Yu and Mu Peeling were also ecstatic as they extended grateful salutes. "There's no need for formalities, it's just a vial of pills. I called all of you here because I have a few things to tell you, Han Li said with a dismissive wave of his hand. We'll be sure to listen carefully, Martial Uncle Han, Song Yu replied in a respectful voice. The other two women also adopted serious expressions in preparation to hear what Han Li had to say. The three of you should know that I've never liked to meddle in the sect's affairs. However, as the Grand Elder of the sect now, it wouldn't be appropriate for me to continue in this manner. I've left all of the troublesome matters for our Martial Uncle Lu to take care of, but I'll need a disciple to correspond with and assist him in overseeing the matters within the sect during my periods of seclusion. Liu Yu, would you be willing to take care of some matters within the sect in my place? Of course, I won't ask you to do this for me free of charge. I'll teach you some secret technique mantras and also reward you with a few treasures, all of which will make you one of the most powerful cultivators at your cultivation base. Even though you were forced to become an in-name disciple of mine in the beginning, if you agree to undertake this duty, I can officially make you my disciple, Han Li offered with a meaningful look in his eyes. Is that true, Master? Liu Yu blurted out as her eyes lit up. Han Li smiled and answered her question with one of his own. Would I lie to you at my current status? If that's the case, then I would be honored to accept this task. Liu Yu replied without any hesitation. Perhaps it was the prospect of attaining more power and influence within the drifting cloud sect that was alluring to her, or perhaps it was the idea of officially becoming Han Li's disciple that appealed to her. Maybe it was a combination of those two factors that prompted her to so readily agree to this arrangement. In any case, Han Li had achieved his first objective, and he nodded with a content expression. He waved his sleeve through the air, and a white jade slip appeared in his hand. He then pulled out a pair of green bracelets, a fiery ruler, and a shiny golden flying sword from his storage pouch, and bestowed all of those items upon her. Liu Yu accepted the jade slip and the treasures with both hands, and she bowed over and over again to express her gratitude with an overjoyed expression on her face. She didn't know that techniques were recorded within the jade slip, but just these ancient treasures alone were unimaginable treasures to her, and were more than enough to satisfy her. Go and pay a visit to Senior Marshal Brother Lu. I'll inform him of this arrangement right away through a voice transmission, Han Li instructed. Liu Yu immediately nodded before departing following a final respectful salute. After she had left, Han Li flipped over his palm, and a voice transmission talisman appeared in his hand. He spoke a few words into the talisman before sending it on its way, and it disappeared into the distance in a flash as a streak of light. Everyone else looked on in silence, and no one dared to disrupt Han Li during this process. Marshal Ni Song, I also have something for you to do, Han Li said as he slowly turned to Song Yu. Please enlighten me, Marshal Uncle Han, Song Yu immediately replied. Han Li paused for a moment before continuing. It's not actually an extremely important matter. I was only hoping that you'd be able to keep an eye out for cultivators with inherently powerful spiritual sense from birth among the disciples recruited by the sect during the next few years. I want to take one as my disciple and instruct them in person. An inherently powerful spiritual sense from birth? Disciples of that nature are extremely rare, so I can't make any guarantees, but I'll do my best. Song Yu was a little hesitant after hearing this request. It's all right, this is not an urgent matter. It's just something for you to keep in the back of your mind. I can see that you've already reached the peak of the mid-core formation stage. In that case, your chances of making a breakthrough by taking the illusionary destruction pill alone won't be very high. I also have a vial of yin essence pills here, which aren't as renowned, but they're extremely potent for female cultivators. You can try taking a few when attempting your breakthrough, Marshal Ni Song. Han Li raised a hand as he spoke, and a small black vial appeared in his hand amid a flash of azure light, then flew soundlessly towards Song Yu. As expected, Song Yu had never heard of this obscure yin essence pill, but she certainly wasn't going to ignore a recommendation from a great cultivator like Han Li. Thus, an elated look appeared on her face, and she accepted the jade vial with words of gratitude. Han Li spoke with Song Yu for a bit longer before sending her on her way. He then turned his gaze toward Mu Peeling. Mu Peeling's body stiffened slightly in response, and she reflexively lowered her head as a faint blush appeared on porcelain-like skin. A complex expression appeared in Han Li's eyes as he asked in a gentle voice, "You've been my concubine for over a century now, right?" Mu Peeling raised her head in the end, and quietly replied, "That's right, my lord." Back when you first accepted me as your concubine, you had only just reached the nascent soul stage, but you're already a late nascent soul great cultivator now. Back when I had accepted you as my concubine, I had planned to use your virgin body to cultivate the copulation essence arts in order to assist me in my breakthroughs. However, I've since progressed at a rate that has been extraordinary, even to me, reaching the mid-nascent soul stage, then the late nascent soul stage through alternative avenues, yet the copulation essence arts are only effective during nascent soul stage breakthroughs. My lord, are you banishing me from the interconnected peaks? Mu Peeling's features immediately paled. Banish you? Of course not. However, you chose to become my concubine in the beginning mostly because you were forced to do so by your family. You're already a core formation cultivator now, so no one will be able to force you to do anything against your will. I also don't want to keep you by my side in such an ambiguous manner any longer. On one hand, it would be a waste of the best years of your life. On the other hand, Wanna is about to break free from the ice wall in the next few years, and I have to be able to give her a proper explanation of what's going on between us. Han Li's words faltered here. So what do you plan on doing with me, my lord? Mu Peeling asked as she bit down on her lower lip. It's quite simple. I'll give you two options, just like I did back then, and you can choose one of them. The first option is that I'll give you a materialistic reward for your efforts in cultivating the copulation essence arts for these past years. I'll then release you from the interconnected peaks, and you'll be completely free to marry anyone you like. In that case, we would be cutting all ties with one another. My lord, with your current reputation, even if you were to release me and vouch for my purity in person, which cultivator in the heavenly south region would dare to marry me? Mu Peeling murmured with a wry smile on her face. Han Li's brows also furrowed upon hearing this, but he continued, the second option is quite simple as well. If you're truly serious about cultivation and would be willing to dedicate your life to it, I can allow you to continue to stay on the interconnected peaks. Officially, you'll still be known as my concubine, but I can treat you as a disciple and provide you some guidance in your cultivation path. Of course, your cultivation aptitude is actually quite good, so I can also get Wanna to make you an official disciple of hers. After all, Wanna's cultivation art is more suitable for female cultivators anyway, so perhaps you'll benefit more from her guidance. Han Li looked at Mu Peeling with a calm expression, and concluded, of course, there may still be some negative rumors spread about you, but this course of action will keep that to a minimum. Mu Peeling fell silent after hearing the options presented by Han Li. Han Li didn't try to hurry her, either, and merely waited patiently for her decision. After a prolonged silence, she suddenly asked, can I choose neither of those options? What do you mean by that? Han Li's brows furrowed slightly. Following another brief silence, a decisive look appeared on Mu Peeling's face as she said, I want to become a true concubine of yours, my lord. I want to stay with you for the rest of my life. You want to become my concubine? That won't work. Han Li's expression changed slightly as he shook his head. Why? Do you despise me for my lowly cultivation base or find me unsightly to look at, my lord? Mu Peeling's face paled even further. That's not the case. You already possess a mid-core formation stage cultivation base, which isn't lowly by any means. Your beauty also ranks in the top 10 among all female cultivators that I've ever seen, Han Li sighed. Then why are you rejecting me? Are you afraid that Elder Nangong won't agree to this arrangement? Mu Peeling asked. After a brief silence, Han Li heaved a resigned sigh, and said, that's only one factor of consideration. The most concerning thing to me is that I'm completely dedicated to my pursuit of the Great Tao, and going into seclusion for several decades at a time will be a regular occurrence for me in the future. It would be fine if you could reach the nascent soul stage and attain a lifespan of over 1,000 years, but if you can't, then you'll most likely only be able to see me a few times in between my bouts of seclusion before you pass away. That would be a waste of your life, and I don't want to see that. Chapter 1190. Assimilation. Even with a vast quantity of pills at one's disposal, it was still not a simple matter to reach the nascent soul stage. There really wasn't a good chance for Mu Peeling to reach the nascent soul stage. Upon hearing Han Li's words, Mu Peeling faltered slightly before she opened her mouth to say something again. However, Han Li raised her hand to cut her off as he said, "That's enough. I'm not asking you to make a decision immediately. You can mull this over for a few years. I also have to go into seclusion now, and during this time, I'll give you some pills for you to attempt a breakthrough to the late core formation stage. Also, I'll have to trouble you to guide China in her cultivation in my stead." "Yes, my lord." Mu Peeling was unwilling to settle for this result, but she could only accept this arrangement in a resigned manner at the sight of Han Li's stern expression. Han Li nodded and gave her a few pills, then spoke with Xianxia for a while before also sending the two of them on their way. Thus, Han Li was the only one left within the cave abode, and he slowly closed his eyes as he heaved a long sigh. It seemed that there was more turmoil in his heart than he had let on. He sat in silence for a full 15 minutes, and when he opened his eyes again, an expression of tranquility had reappeared on his face. It appeared that he had been able to settle his internal conflict. He suddenly patted the storage pouch hanging from his waist, and a flash of silver light immediately appeared before him. The humanoid puppet emerged, and stood in front of him in a completely stationary manner. Han Li examined the humanoid puppet for a while, and a layer of silver light suddenly surfaced over the humanoid puppet's face at his behest. Its middle-aged features blurred, and when they regained clarity again, those facial features had become completely identical to Han Li's, making it appear as if the puppet were none other than Han Li himself. Almost at the exact same moment, the humanoid puppet's body tremored, and it suddenly grew a few inches, making it identical to Han Li in height as well. Han Li examined the puppet again before nodding with a content expression, and waving a hand toward it. The humanoid puppet's expressionless figure swayed, and it immediately disappeared amid a flash of silver light. Han Li lowered his head in contemplation for a while before exiting the hall of the cave abode, heading directly for the secret chamber. Along the way, he suddenly said without any premonition, "My second nascent soul hasn't been causing any trouble for you in the cauldron, has it, fellow Daoist?" The voice of a small child replied from within the heaven-void cauldron in Han Li's sleeve. It's just a mid-nascent soul without a body. How will it pose any trouble to me? It's just that with this guy in here, the cauldron is feeling a little cramped. Please bear with it for a while longer, fellow Daoist Endless Sky. I'll assimilate this second nascent soul right away, then withdraw it from the cauldron so you won't be troubled by its presence any longer. After that, I'll assist you during your metamorphosis stage lightning tribulation so you can manifest a human form. Do you have any objections to this arrangement, fellow Daoist? Of course not. I'm glad that you still remember this, fellow Daoist Han. The Endless Sky Beast was elated upon hearing Han Li's words. Han Li smiled and didn't converse with the Endless Sky Beast any further as he made his way into the secret chamber in a flash. The stone door behind him closed soundlessly. Han Li slowly made his way over to the center of the secret chamber before waving his sleeve through the air. A burst of azure light shot forth before spinning in the air, then transforming into a small azure cauldron that hovered before him. Azure light flashed over the surface of the cauldron as the indistinct figure of a small child appeared. The small child was sitting on the lid of the cauldron with his legs crossed, wearing an expectant smile on his face, as if he were preparing to watch an enthralling show. Han Li's expression remained unchanged, and he completely disregarded the small child as he patted his storage pouch to summon a stack of formation flags. He raised a hand and a dozen or so formation flags flew toward all directions within the secret chamber in a flash. A faint yellow light barrier then appeared, enshrouding the entire secret chamber within. Han Li made a hand seal expressionlessly before pointing a finger gently at the heaven-void cauldron. The cauldron lid immediately flew into the air at his behest. However, the small child had reacted in advance, flying off to the side while continuing to appraise the small cauldron with a smile on his face. A burst of rumbling erupted from within the cauldron, but nothing else happened aside from that. Han Li's expression darkened as he chanted something and cast an incantation seal onto the cauldron. The heaven-void cauldron immediately tremored slightly as something emerged from within. It was an azure cocoon around half a foot in length, constructed from countless azure threads. Break! Han Li let loose a low cry. A peculiar scene unfolded. All of the azure threads that the cocoon was comprised of snapped before dissipating into the specks of light in the blink of an eye. The second nascent soul was immediately revealed. It current had its eyes tightly shut and was hovering in the air in a completely still manner, seemingly yet to regain consciousness. Han Li's eyes narrowed upon seeing this, and he immediately feigned a grabbing motion without any hesitation. Several shiny silver needles abruptly appeared between his fingertips, and he aimed a cold glance at the nascent soul in the air before sweeping his hand through the air. Black light suddenly flashed around the seemingly unconscious nascent soul, upon which it disappeared into thin air. The silver needles naturally struck empty space as a result. Han Li was not startled by this turn of events. Instead, a cold smile appeared on his face as he pointed toward the heaven-void cauldron, upon which a clump of azure threads suddenly shot forth from a corner of the secret chamber. Brilliant azure light erupted, enshrouding a certain patch of space. A muffled groan rang out as the second nascent soul appeared once again within the flashing azure threads. At this point, its neck and limbs had already been tightly bound by the azure threads, rendering it completely immobile. At this moment, the dozen or so silver needles that had missed their target earlier flashed through the air again. The silver needles shot forth at a rapid speed, embedding themselves into various parts of the nascent soul's body in the blink of an eye. The nascent soul's body tremored, and it immediately lost its ability to summon any magic power. A look of despair appeared on its little face. You won't be getting away. All of your thought processes are replicas of mine, so how are you going to fool me with your tricks? I don't plan to destroy you, I merely intend to assimilate you again, so why do you continue to resist? Han Li asked in a gentle voice, as if he were conversing with a close friend. The second nascent soul knew that there was no way for it to escape, so it relinquished any efforts to resist as it roared in a resentful manner. You won't destroy me? After losing my sentient will I still be me? What's the difference? That's true. However, you're supposed to be my second nascent soul, so you shouldn't have sentient will of your own to begin with. You have nothing to complain about, as I'm merely taking away a privilege from you, not a right. You can only blame yourself for manifesting something that shouldn't exist. Han Li gave a cold reply, and he didn't want to waste any more time with words. As such, he made a hand seal, and brilliant azure light erupted from the threads that were binding the second nascent soul. The second nascent soul felt its vision go dark before it fell truly unconscious. Only then did Han Li's expression ease slightly. However, a thought then suddenly occurred to him as he turned his gaze toward the small child beside him. In response to Han Li's cold glare, the small child obediently dissipated into nothingness without a word. Han Li nodded to himself upon seeing this before pointing a finger at the cauldron hovering in the air. Azure light flashed over the surface of the cauldron before the lid was replaced. Almost at the exact same moment, Han Li opened his mouth to blast forth a burst of azure light, which swept the small cauldron up within. The cauldron then rapidly shrank within the azure light, flashing a few times before being swallowed by Han Li. Han Li heaved a faint sigh before sitting down with his legs crossed. At the same time, he feigned a grabbing motion toward the second nascent soul in what seemed to a casual manner. The nascent soul was immediately drawn to him by an immense suction force, and it was forced to hover around 10 feet in front of Han Li. Han Li used his spiritual sense to carefully examine the nascent soul's condition, and after verifying that its spiritual sense was indeed far inferior to his, he closed his eyes in a content manner before patting the top of his own head. Azure light immediately flashed over the top of his head as an azure nascent soul that was only a few inches in size silently emerged. The nascent soul was standing on a small azure cauldron and carrying a green wooden ruler in both hands. There was a white bead circling above its head, and a ball of indistinct black chi on its glabella, as well as several tens of miniature golden swords flying around its body. This was none other than the main nascent soul that Han Li had been arduously cultivating for over a century. The nascent soul wore a completely neutral expression as it glanced toward the second nascent soul in a calm manner. Azure light flashed from the small cauldron beneath its feet, carrying it directly over to the second nascent soul. When it was only about a foot away from the second nascent soul, Han Li's nascent soul suddenly halted in its flight. It glanced at the azure threads around its counterpart's body, and suddenly stamped its little foot gently onto the small cauldron. The small cauldron emitted a ringing sound, and the azure threads around the second nascent soul's body disappeared in a flash, leaving only the nascent soul itself hovering in mid-air. The heaven-void cauldron beneath Han Li's nascent soul suddenly began to slowly expand. The nascent soul sat atop the cauldron with its little legs crossed in a calm and collected manner. It then tossed its green ruler into the air, then made a hand seal and chanted something in an unintelligibly quiet voice. Brilliant azure light erupted from the body of Han Li's nascent soul, and it slowly closed its eyes. However, the ball of black chi on its glabella suddenly materialized to form a third inky black eye. The eye was shimmering with an unsettling light, and it stared intently at the second nascent soul with an unblinking gaze. Right at this moment, Han Li's nascent soul suddenly stopped its chanting as a burst of black light suddenly shot forth from its third eye, directly striking the second nascent soul's body. The second nascent soul shuddered as it opened its eyes, but its pupils were completely blank, as if it were delirious. Right at this moment, Han Li's nascent soul also opened its eyes. Two pillars of azure light erupted from its pupils, shooting directly into the eyes of the second nascent soul, as if it were forcibly injecting something into the second nascent soul's body. The second nascent soul's limbs hung limply by his sides, yet its body was trembling uncontrollably. At the same time, an expression of excruciating pain suddenly appeared on its blank face, as if it wanted to cry out, but was unable to do so. Han Li's nascent soul remained completely expressionless throughout this entire process. It merely continued to blast the azure pillars of light out of its eyes, and completely ignored the second nascent soul's suffering.